I mean, I don't have any complaints if you like sneak a fry here or there.
Well, it's very bad manners to eat on a stream, unless it's popcorn and you're watching some real drama. So, did you get a chance to see my Instagram post today, my reel?
Uh, you did a reel?
You have not read the Chinsult?
No, I was reading. When did you post it?
Oh, earlier today, I think before I talked to you.
I haven't been around today.
I
Um,
know. But yeah, the Chinsult, you'll enjoy it. It,
the
it comes from
chin
my stream.
salt.
It comes from my stream yesterday. It was found in the Chintz book.
Oh. Boring, you say? Check this out. Oh, that's cute. Okay. I will like thoroughly digest it when we're done.
Well, I can read it to the stream since this is being
Okay,
recorded
read
for
it to the
posterity.
stream.
And you can check it out when you get a chance. So this is they're talking about English commercial printing, so printing cottons in England.
Hmm.
So this says, when dealing with the printed cottons, the 18th century scribes showed a command of vituperation that would make a cab driver sigh with envy. This from The Spinster by J. Roberts, 1719, is a mild example. A tawdry, pie-spotted, flabby, ragged, low-priced thing called calico, made by a parcel of heathens and pagans that worship the devil and work for a halfpenny a day.
Is that it?
That is the chinsult.
Oh my.
Yeah, so I mean, have you ever insulted a fabric so vehemently?
I actually think I have. Um,
I
but
have cursed some slippery satin.
I think I think I was once dealing with like a really just horribly made fabric, just really terrible quality, like super thin. Like I think it was one of those ones that was like so thin you could actually like rip it. And like that's
Mhm.
what was happening. And like I had some fine vulgar words for that fabric, but never not those kinds of words. I didn't turn it into something out of the Salem witch trials. Hi, Deamery.
Hello, hello. Yeah, it's pretty funny, I think.
Yes,
Anyway,
that was
um,
interesting. You know what's funny is I feel like maybe that should be include like when we get together enough antique ads from magazines for stuff, maybe we should like throw that in there as just like a
mhm,
little extra, you
mhm.
know, fun thing since we
Well,
I love all the insults that spinster,
yeah, the chinsult is gonna have to be added to our lexicon though. If you're gonna insult somebody with some fabric, I don't know,
Now we need
some
but
fabric wordage.
now we also need something that's like a fabric assault instead of just a fabric insult. Hi, Jan.
Hey.
There's lots
Oh
of
my goodness.
room for creativity here.
Indeed there is.
Well, as everybody's coming in, we can just make some little announcements here. Like next week, oh my God, we finished this book. Um, I'm a little sad because I love my grandma Talula, but I am happy to move on to less depressing lives because
I
man, your girl
know.
lived through some stuff. Like she lived
I
through
know.
enough for like 17 lives.
I know. I feel
Ugh.
like, lots of bad things happened in the 1800s and early century. I mean, lots of bad things happen all the time,
But
right?
I
But
almost feel like only bad things happened.
I feel like Tallulah had more than her fair share.
Yes. So
It seems, yeah.
we're gonna finish the book 16 through 19. And then just in case anyone still hasn't gotten their copy, our next book will be Crazy Quilts by Penny McMorris. There are links in, I'll add link later, but like there's links to previous videos, to get this. And there's going to actually be some quilts for us to look at from New England Quilt Museum that are crazy, which is why we're reading this. So please join us for that. Hopefully this one won't be depressing.
I'm gonna say Crazy Quilts are gonna be pretty upbeat.
It looks like it's gonna be a pretty fast book too, because it's a lot more photo than text. Yeah. And then when we start Crazy Quilts, we have a very exciting announcement for the book that happens after this, but you're gonna have to wait for that. And then Steph, what's going on with Mary Witherwax?
Well, did I bring any of it to my desk? No, it is all, well, no, actually, I do have my Mary Witherwax book, but we are well underway. There's some folks that are just sort of getting started. There's some people that have people that have picked their fabrics and thought about, what they're going to make. And then there's people that have kept up one a day and more. There's people who have made me look like a slowpoke, and I've been doing one a day.
Yeah, I'm not doing any a day so far, but I am going to a retreat at my girlfriend's house on Friday. That's what I'm bringing.
Awesome. Yeah. And the thing about hand sewing, I mean, hand sewing is my go-to for all things, like if I want to make something, I'm more likely to hand stitch it than I am to pull out the machine, unless it's something that requires like, girthy strength construction, but it's also so calming to me, and it's this kind of thing you can do over a conversation. You can, watch TV, listen to TV.
I want to get to the point where I feel drawn to pull out handwork. I'm not yet at that point. Like it's in my brain, right? The draw that I want to do and stuff, but I want to feel the comfort from it. And I just haven't made that connection yet. So maybe,
well, and I hope you will. And I feel like you can get there. I know some people, it's just not their jam. They just don't have, any desire, and that's okay. I don't quite understand them, but
I have desire. I want something that's far more portable than my.
And that's the thing. It is a fantastic, if you want to get into hand sewing, this is so much easier than, like something big, because these little blocks are tiny. And even there's a technique where you do 4 of them at a time, so you have more fabric to grab onto. They're still, just throw it all in a tote bag, and, you're not hauling around some big heavy project. Like, lap quilting doesn't have to be like lap quilting. So,
well, there's been some great photos posted on your weekly
I know. I need to get in touch because with those folks, because I want to be able to share them either here or on my stream on our social media, and I just need to make sure that we're okay doing that. I know some folks don't want to have their stuff shared publicly, but yeah, it's just so inspirational. And even for folks that don't want to join, and don't want to do it, it's still fun to look at, everybody made the same block, but what color choices did they make, or what?
Oh yeah, the blocks look totally different.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun.
And then what by chance are you going to talk about on your stream on Thursday?
I haven't decided yet. Sometimes it is truly a last minute thing, as I'm sure that people who watch can tell. They're like, oh, she didn't plan this one. But we're still reading the Chintz book, and the Chintz book is interesting. But yeah, I have a few things up my sleeve. I have some quilt photos I haven't shown, and yeah. Yesterday we dug through some sewing kits, some sewing boxes that I had realized I never, I got them, I think one from Goodwill and one from an estate auction, and I never even, I dug through them, I think, when I first got them, and then put them in the corner, because I usually empty all that stuff out. And I had never gone through them, so I was like, I could do this on stream. So yeah, we found some we found some interesting things, and we also found some utter junk. So it was fun. It's like, when you're little.
I guess doing that live could be quite a gamble, because you never know what someone's going to stick into a sewing basket.
I had some general idea what was in there. I mean, it wasn't like opening the lid for the first time, but it's kind of like, when I don't know if you ever did this when you were little, but I always loved to dig through my grandmother's purse. Like, what'd she have in there? Or my mom's purse. My mom's purse was always even more interesting.
Dusty Linty mints.
Well, my grandmother's purse was always like very neat and tidy, but she was always prepared. So she had all kinds of interesting things.
My mom was like
Um,
that.
yeah, my mother was just like everything in there. And so honestly, if you were looking for something that was missing, my mom's purse was a good bet.
Jimmy Hoffa's briefcase kind of scenario.
Yeah, something like that.
Hi, Janet. And then I guess like our last little announcement for the moment is our next Needlework Nights will be on the 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we are discussing stilettos.
And I found one in the basket yesterday.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And I obviously won't show it because I want to save it for next week. But yeah, as I was looking, I was like, I think this is a stiletto.
I mean, I think one thing that can count in that category is things you would use as a stiletto, because on the one hand, things aren't always labeled. And then there's that big question between like stiletto and awls sometimes. And,
Oh, we found an awl too.
Oh, there you go. Well, remember, there's one that's on my site that's been up there for a while that's really cool. That white and brown. And there's been a little bit of a, is this a stiletto? Is it an awl? Who can tell? So I would say that things that are questionable can be fair game as well. Almost like, like who's that Pokemon? What's that sewing tool?
Yes, it started off as a barbecue skewer, but I use it as a stiletto. So Jigglypuff turns into.
No, I think that would be, oh my God, that just gave me like a total like sticker idea. Anywho, so Talula and her trauma.
Oh, for Talula. So I had read ahead so far. Where are we? Are we chapter 13?
We're 14
or
through
14.
15.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 14 through 16.
Okay.
And I did start to read the notes. I have regretted taking your advice.
Oh no.
Because of reading about George's death.
Oh.
And the treatment of his body. I was like, I would sleep better tonight not knowing that information.
And I'm thinking, did I miss that one? I have to wait till we get there because I'm thinking.
Oh yeah, trust me, we're talking about that one. That's in like 15, I think.
Oh
yeah, it's in 15. So yeah, let's start with 14. Return and farewell. And it's funny. Yes, Janet, George's death is disturbing. I started Return and Farewell very naively and literally wrote a note down. It's so lovely to finally see Tom and Talula with a home their family can be comfortable in after all of the hardships. And I mean, I do feel that way. They built this beautiful home. It's 9 rooms that they've added on, and looks all, here we go. Here's the picture. It looks all, I mean, I would buy that home now,
I know it's a really cute house, and it's plain, but it's got that big porch and then those little pieces of gingerbread that are in the corners of the posts, and it's just so charming.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could definitely see, somebody wanting to pay a lot of money for a house like that because it's just.
Well, and I was so happy they were finally comfortable somewhere, because I feel like they're at least their descriptions of the other houses and having, what was it, 14 people or something in a 2-room, two-room house, stuff like. Anywho, so yeah, I was like, in reading this note now, how naive I was to feel so uplifted.
That nice moment in time.
Yeah. And then, I mean, let's see.
Well,
I
before you move on to something tragic, can we at least take one moment to look at the beautiful carpenter's wheel? I mean, that's such a beautiful quilt.
I know, and I the fact that she's made, because I mean we've seen that, not maybe not that exact quilt, but others of that pattern she's made early on, I think. Um, trying to
Was
think.
there one? I knew
Yeah,
there was the crowfoot one.
I feel like there was, because oftentimes, it looks like she makes one and someone's like, "Oh my God, I need that," and then she makes a new
Yeah,
one.
she made yes, but I think it was she made Lemoyne stars and like those
I mean, it
crowfoot
sounds like
ones.
it was numerous things. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's
I mean,
not
what
super
was it?
important, but
I mean, was it the very beginning, or it might have been in the paper that Nancilu wrote, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, Goose Tracks, I think, is one of the ones that she made multiple versions of. Or maybe I don't know. It's this book. It's stretched out in tragedy. But yeah, she made like I don't know, estimated 180 quilts.
was
So I
that
mean,
in the
there's really
paper? I don't know. I don't remember hearing that figure. Did she say that in the
yeah, that
paper?
it might have been in the paper, but yeah, it's an estimated like I think the number 180 is really sticking out to me. And you guys, if you're remembering something different, call me out. But she made a ridiculous amount of quilts. So I would say there's probably a good chance every quilt she made at least two of that, you know?
Yeah, it said,
Uh,
I mean, it's definitely said more than once that she's made multiples of the same, just never exactly the same, like
mhm.
different fabrics or something
Different
like that.
colors and things, yeah.
You know what I find interesting is on just a little aside, with all these pictures of quilts, especially when we get into like the Sunbonnet Sues later and stuff.
Mhm.
In these photos and then the descriptions of quilts, there's multiple times where it's mentioned that a lot of these quilts were very much loved and used and
Mhm.
washed. But from the pictures, they
I
don't look
know.
heavily
I
used. I
know.
mean, I understand like we're not seeing really close. But even in the far away, like I don't see a lot of fabric loss. Um, given
Well,
that,
and I mean this one in particular, the colors are just still so
right, you don't see
strong.
you
Yeah.
don't see a lot of those issues that you would see. And she must have gotten her hands on fabrics that were well, okay, so this particular one is probably the heaviest damaged I've seen, and it's the one on 118. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just because we're talking about quilts and wear. Um, this one I can definitely see in the corners. We've got some fabric loss, some tearing. One of the blocks up in the upper left, the browns
Oh yeah, there's some
are
stains and
having a
stuff.
problem. I'm just going to show everyone what quilt we're talking about here, but you probably won't be able to notice the damage. It's like up
Hmm.
here, we're missing some browns and things. So I'm just really, I guess I'm shocked / impressed at one, her workmanship and how well that held up. But number two, obviously, like, people cared about these. And I feel like
Hmm.
for a family that massive, it's so much more likely that you're going to have people that don't care. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, and
shocked.
yeah, and I mean, I feel like we go back to this a lot, and it really does. It just remains as like this big, like I don't know, shock and surprise, and like delight because I mean, you don't have a lot of families that can would be able to track down quilts like this. You
No.
know, I mean, I've said from the very beginning, Nancilu was really lucky that she reached out to all these cousins and things, and they all were like, "Yeah, I have the quilt." I think there was one where the quilt had been used, like, in the car and with the dogs, and then the woman who
Mhm.
owned it was like, "Oh, whoops." Um, but yeah, and I guess, I guess you think about like in a family with so much loss, maybe that has something to do with it. Like, there was this culture of, you know, keeping the quilts and valuing them. Um, I mean, not to jump ahead, but when her son died, like they disinfected the quilt and sent it back to her once they found it. I can't imagine that happening today.
No.
Somebody comes to a hospital wrapped in a quilt and be like, "Oh, trash," you
Well,
know?
it's funny. I'm even shocked at the fact that they were like, "Oh yeah, we took the quilt after he died to disinfect it." I'm like, "Wow, you guys disinfected something then?" Oh, okay. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't see that coming.
Right.
Also like the fact that the idea that you could disinfect a quilt like that at that time period, I don't know that that would have been very possible, but I'm glad they sent it back to her, although half of me is like, was that more helpful or more painful? Who
Yeah, I
knows?
don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But given the fact that she wasn't allowed to see the body, and that was, as they state more than once, that's very important, I guess, during this time frame
Hmm.
in their religion. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and that was mentioned multiple times.
well, because
Two of her
more,
sons.
I was to say, yeah, because more than one died.
Right. And she wasn't able to see them. And having been with a relative when they died and having seen a relative, well, and I mean, been to open casket funerals has always bothered me. But then seeing my grandmother pretty soon after she died, I was upset that I had to see them, you know? And so I don't know. I mean, I guess it's culturally just a thing. Like I would rather remember people the last time I saw them,
Mm.
when they were hale and hearty or at least not dead. And I don't know. I mean, I guess in this day and age where they don't have pictures of people, they only have their memories. Maybe that's what it's about. I don't know.
Mm.
Um,
Janet wondered if
oh
they sent
yeah.
the quilt back because it was part of his
Part of his
belongings. Yeah.
belongings. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that would be the military. Like, I guess the military does try to return all belongings.
Hmm.
But also, I mean, to these days, I mean, you could definitely see like they have very little respect for something that's just an article of
Well, a quilt
bedding or
these
clothing.
days, if you were taken to the hospital wrapped in it, carrying something very infectious, they would say it's biohazard, just like your
Hmm.
clothes, and
Yeah,
probably get rid of them. But
yeah.
at the time, they didn't take as much precaution, so I guess that was somewhat of a blessing. We wouldn't know about certain things, although they don't picture. I don't think it's pictured. I think they just talk about it.
Yeah, I don't they didn't even say like what it looked like, did they?
I don't think so, and I don't even think they said like who has it, if anyone does. I think it
Yeah.
was just kind of as an aside, like, oh, by the way.
Hmm.
Um, but speaking of like loss here on 207, I felt terrible that Talula ends up being too sickly to visit her father when he's
I
done.
know. I know. And that broke my heart too. And then, at least her sister was with him and
Recorded his last words.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, on the one hand, I'm really glad that that guy had that much peace right at the end.
mhm. Yeah, and it's funny. I don't, and where is it? What he said? Yes, if this is death, it sure is.
Yeah, it sure is
I,
sweet.
I have a very good friend when her father-in-law died. Now he had, Lou Gehrig's disease. So it was very, it was debilitating, tragic, everything. But he came from a community that was like, when you're sick, they all come. And
Hmm.
he was like, wheeling dealing from his hospital bed until it was time. And when it was time, he was like, he had taken care of all of his things. And he just basically was like, goodbye. And my friend was like, what? And I guess some people could just do that, They don't, some people fade away. Some people, I guess, die suddenly. Some people are just like, okay, I'm good to go.
Beam me up, Scotty. Like,
Yeah. Like, so and I mean, far be it for me to I've only been in attendance with one person when they have passed away, and it wasn't like
same.
that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, mine was not like that either. It was definitely far more of the, tragic side. But I will say probably those ones that are just like, okay, I'm ready, let's go. Those ones probably don't ever become ghosts because they have
Probably
finished
not.
all the business. And
They
that's when
took
they're
their
like,
business.
and yeah, and shut down. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we will find
Um,
humor in this tragedy.
indeed.
I
Indeed.
I I found it interesting too that on 110, I will come back to the quilts. Um, that Tallulah ends up giving birth to a 12th child at 45. I was shocked she could even carry to term given how sickly she ends up
Yeah,
being
and
throughout her life.
And not to skip ahead or anything, but her female troubles, they never, Nancilu doesn't get into the details, and she may not have even had specifics, but probably having 12 children would probably make all your lady bits just go inside out. Like, no
Yeah.
more, no
No,
mas.
I was definitely wondering what those female
So
traits might
yeah,
have been.
my
They
guess is
mentioned a surgery. You think it's a prolapse?
that would have to be what it is. I mean,
Well, I mean, it could be
it could be something like
cervical cancer.
cancer
Yeah.
or, things like that. But I'm just like, 12 children's a lot. She's a small woman and she's a
Hmm.
sickly woman. She's
Hmm.
been sick throughout her life for various reasons. And I feel like she must have a lot of stamina, but, to make it through. But it's gotta be like that many children. Yeah. I
No,
mean, that's,
definitely rough on your body, especially at that age. 45, 45 would be considered super high risk now.
oh yeah, you're
Yeah, I
considered
mean,
a geriatric pregnancy like over 35, I think.
yeah, so like
Like,
45
yeah.
then.
That's
And I
5 years younger than me. No.
if I remember correctly, that child only survives a year.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that child dies. So yeah, to go through all of that at 45. And then it does mention that she's often ill after after that pregnancy. To
Mhm.
then lose the child anyways. It's just, oh my God. Jan loves your lady bits part. Your lady bits coming.
Well.
Back to the quilts we skipped over. On 108, that honeybee. Oh my God.
I know. And what's interesting? This one, was it this one? I'm trying to
I mean, the
remember.
star too, but the honeybee, especially for me.
Yeah, the honeybee is really beautiful. And it was mentioned in, okay, I'm thinking of a different one that we haven't gotten to yet. But yeah, the honeybee I think was mentioned in the paper, and I was really excited to be able to, because the paper, the version of that I have was from not from a copy of Uncoverings that I own, so I didn't have any of the pictures because I got it
Oh
off of
yeah.
the Quilt Index. So I think it mentioned the honeybee, and I was able to come in here and look and see what these quilts look like, and yeah,
Hmm.
that was one of the ones I really liked
Yeah, I don't
because
know if I'd heard that name, if I would have at all pictured this.
yeah, I
Yeah.
had heard of the pattern before. I'd heard of a like a bee type quilt, and so I kind of tried to imagine what it looked like. But when you look at it, it definitely looks like bees,
Hmm.
coming together. And it's a familiar looking pattern.
But it only looks like bees if I think about bees while looking at it. Otherwise, I don't see them all separate like that. I see that as one pattern, almost like a
As
tile
one
block.
unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I almost just
Oh,
kind of think of it almost like as like, yeah, I guess like a tile pattern. It would really be the
mhm.
best way to describe it.
And I'm trying to remember if this one, I may not have read this here. Okay, so it was never washed. I feel like there's one of these quilts, and pardon me because I might be mixing this up with something else that I've read recently, but I feel like this was pieced and not applique. Like those little teardrop
Um,
shapes that are, I feel like I saw somewhere like that might be pieced,
there's
but that
another,
also might be another quilt.
yeah, there's another one in here that we is part of these chapters that I feel like looked like it should have been applicated and it turned out it was pieced.
Mhm.
What was I reading? Maybe it is that one, but I don't feel
There comes a point, you guys, when you look at quilts so much and you read about them
no,
so much, you can't remember. Like,
no, they all bleed together.
hmm
I do remember a particular one that looked like applique, and there was a definite mention of like, no, this is piece, and I was like, wow.
I'm wondering, was it the lifeboat? Because the lifeboat is one that it was the one I was just thinking of, but maybe not. I can't remember. Well, nonetheless, she was.
I wish there was more pictures of her quilting,
Mhm.
like sitting there quilting and
Yeah, yeah.
um
Um,
because it sounds like there was certainly plenty of opportunity to get pictures since it sounds like she was quilting every spare moment she ever had.
Yeah, but you know what? So many of these pictures were, they were like events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The funeral. Or, like funeral. There's another one. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these big group pictures are funerals. Um,
So Janet says the bee pattern is a 9 patch with applique body and wings usually.
hmm Yeah, and it might not be this one that I'm thinking of, but like I said, it could very well be an entirely different quilt and maker that I've got
I
on my
mean,
mind.
we've only seen like 100 quilts in here that she's made. So yeah, it's funny in the photo on 113 of her at the sanitarium with a
hmm
nurse. It's like it's a
Yes,
totally different person.
I know. I mean, it looks like, her face looks like her, you know, I don't know. I look at it and it's like, that's kind of the way they were at sanitariums. Like,
Mhm.
that's the way it looked, you in your bed clothes and you're, in a wheelchair. But it almost looks like a staged picture, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah, like
It
they were
almost
like
doesn't look
making like
real.
an ad campaign.
Mhm. Yes. Got female troubles? Come to the sanitarium
Yeah. Yeah.
where a nurse will feed you soup outdoors.
I mean, I'm glad to see that it's like reported that like she
Mhm.
was well cared for and treated there because you just never know. But yeah,
Yeah. And oh, and then so also 113 where she talks about she was so ill with female problems. They had where was it? They had exhausted their efforts with folk and patent medicines.
hmm
So the folk remedies are everything from like actual helpful things, right? Like, you know, the different types of herbs and things like for a sore throat to, sleeping with a rock under your pillow kind of stuff. And
hmm
then the patent medicines, my God, those might have made her worse depending on what was wrong. Like, oh, poor thing. Um, but the delicacy of her particular condition, it would have bordered on sin for Tom to have a man examine his wife. Although I'm thinking,
Is that one thing that makes you think prolapse?
oh, well, yeah, I mean, she says female problems. So anything below the belt, I'm sure is what we're talking
Mm.
about here. And, that would be something, that his beliefs, I don't think it's necessarily about the time period. I think it's Tom's beliefs
hmm
that a man should not be looking at my wife's late nether regions. But I'm
But
like, what do you
now it's
think
no
they were doing
longer
at the sanitarium?
it's not even lady bits anymore. It's just anything in the nether.
But my point being, what were they doing in Battle Creek? Surely looking at what's going on, all right? Um, yeah.
Well, Tom wasn't there, so what he don't know
Yeah.
won't hurt him.
But I was also interested that two of her sons, so I guess Matt had gone there for treatment, but
Mhm.
Roger was working there. Battle Creek Sanitarium was like, that's like the Mayo Clinic. Like it was
Mhm.
big, it was a big famous place.
Jan said it's the lady bit zone.
The Lady Bit Zone. Yeah.
I mean, I like I said, I was glad that she, had a good experience there and came back well.
Yes, I'm glad she survived and came back. Yeah, because
Mhm.
you think like, it would be it would be par for the course for her to have just gotten worse and not have survived it.
No, when I
Um,
started reading this, I'm like, oh my, oh, what's
yeah,
where you're reading, right? And you're just like, oh God, oh, what's next? Oh.
yeah.
And then
Real
like
quick though,
go ahead.
on page 109, the one when that she had been sick and then was getting better again, where she said she began to feel stouter.
Yeah.
I love that. I was like, feeling a little puny. Now I'm feeling stouter.
Well, and it's funny is I kind of feel like that like little quote like fits so well with this picture. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
looking very stouty in this picture.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of doing her thing there in the middle, just very like and it's funny because one of her daughters in the back is like totally given like the side eye.
Some of the pictures, yes, the children are like, "Mm."
Yeah, she's got like bombastic side eye in that photo. Um, but I have one of these quilts in my inventory that looks very similar to this, and I
So which one?
just love it. It's on
The full blown tulip.
the lack of page numbers bugs me. 114. Yeah, the full-blown
Yeah.
tulip.
That would almost, and I realize it's not, but it reminds me of the Brimfield block. You know what I'm talking about?
For me, it kind of reminds me of like a crown of thorns scenario.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um, or kind of a little like compassy, but I love the scrappy nature of it. I would really like to see that one close up.
Yeah, that one is
I
really
hope
cool.
someday that these will end up in a museum. You know, when the children are passed away,
Yeah,
if people don't want to do anything with them.
we'll have to check in with because I know Nancilu died in 2014, I think.
Mhm.
So I'll have to check in with Mary Kay because I know she and Mary Kay were good friends and I don't know if any plans were made for any of the quilts,
Mhm.
other than what Nancy might have owned through her family.
Mhm.
Oh, one thing I forgot was where Dr. Harvey Kellogg of Kellogg's accepted bales of cotton
Yep.
for Tallulah's treatment. I'm like,
Yeah, Janet agrees that she thinks that that full-blown tulip quilt looks more crown of thornness.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never heard full blown tulip as well. Although, I mean, I guess if you look at it's the little units, you've got like that
Mhm.
pointy part and then the things on the side. But yeah,
Mhm.
it doesn't look very tulipy to me either.
Well, if we move on to 15, we're making our final move here to
Yep.
County. What is it? Alabama? It's Alabama.
Uh, yeah, where is it? Yeah, yeah.
It's weird to me that they discuss everything in terms of counties and not towns.
You and I had this conversation not long ago. We got counties in the South. It's just the way it is.
And
That was a
then
question for you guys where you're from. Are they towns? Are they counties? Like what's the big, and it's usually about your local government, whether it's called a town or a county. I mean, we've got cities and counties. We don't really have
we
towns.
have counties, we just don't discuss everything in terms of county. This conversation came up because while we were in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is another state that even now discusses everything in terms of counties. You know, we were watching a quilt turning and they keep saying, Bucks County,
Yeah.
Berks County,
Berks
this, and I
County.
and I was like, what is that? Because when you say county to me, I don't really know where you're talking about. And even counties can be pretty big, so there's still a
Yeah.
lot that can be narrowed
Yeah.
down. So I was like, what is it with that? Like, we have counties in Massachusetts. Everyone knows what county they live in. There is some governance at the county level, but for the most part, we're more town, and we're more like town and then state. There's like
Hmm.
courthouses and things that are county, but no one really discusses them a whole lot. So DeMarie said city
Yeah.
and then county,
Hmm.
and then Janet said villages, towns, then counties in
In New York
NYX and
State
California counties when it's something
to do
to
with the
do with
government. Yeah.
government.
Well, and I'm wondering if Massachusetts specifically, because Massachusetts is a Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia is a Commonwealth too, but 'cause I mean, that's where I grew up, but things are a little bit different. Kentucky's also a Commonwealth. And I'm trying to remember, there's one more. And it has to do with the government of the state and
Mm-hmm.
then like how all that stuff breaks down. And I used to know more about this because I actually worked in a job where I had to look at stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it was always a joke. We'd be like, Massachusetts and Virginia again.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that though, because you don't hear that talk in New Hampshire. You don't really hear that talk in Maine. So I'm wondering if potentially it's a New England thing.
Hmm.
Because I'd have to ask someone about like, but I don't hear that in like Connecticut. It's always towns.
Hmm.
So, and we might discuss either like the East. Well, for Massachusetts, we talk about the the East Coast, Central Mass, and then
Yeah.
Western Mass. And I know it's the same for like
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting because
Yeah,
whenever
well,
you
and
know,
Maryland has those kind of like we have Central Maryland, we have the Eastern Shore, and we have Western Maryland, and they're because of the geographic barriers, they're very separate. And so I
Mhm,
think a lot of times too, you know what I mean, looking at what Talula was dealing with, you're dealing with, you know, you can't travel quickly. A move to another state or another area is a big deal. Like you don't see your family for years, you know. And I think that's a lot of it then. And I don't know how much this goes into the county, city, you know, town sort of thing, but it a lot of times it's about geographic barriers, you know, and like in our case in Maryland, we've got a like a mountain range that separates one little chunk, Western Maryland from the central part of Maryland. And
mhm,
now there's a pass cut through, but back in the day, it wasn't that easy to get through there. And then, you know,
mhm,
we've got water that separates us from that little peninsula that we share with Delaware and Virginia.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm sure there's
Mhm.
probably an actual reason.
Yeah, yeah. If
Like
you know, there's probably somebody in like a county and town organization or something that could be like, oh, here's the reason.
can't believe you didn't
But no.
know that. So I guess in this chapter we can talk about George and his deafness, which is on page 120.
Mhm.
And let me get back to the notes. So George ends up getting conscripted into the army,
Mhm. And
for World War One.
he thought he would get out of it because of his deformed foot. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, you poor baby. Why do you have a deformed foot?
But what's
Like,
funny, I know yeah, we don't know why, do we? They never talk about that. Um, um, but he doesn't even end up really like be doing anything dangerous. He becomes kind of like a groom for the horses and things like that.
mhm.
Um, what sucks is while he's on base, he ends up dying of a meningitis outbreak.
I know, you know, and
Um,
that's something that I mean, even today we hear about occasionally, you know, and I think it's usually younger people, you know, college campuses, you often hear about it. And I guess there's a isn't there a shot now? There's a vaccination
vaccine.
for some type, one of the meningitises.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like when that strikes, like if you don't, I mean, even today, if you don't get the right kind of medical care quickly, I mean, it does.
I'm
It's a
actually
quick
shocked
killer.
they could even almost kind of contain it back then just because it's so
It's
contagious
very
and and
contagious. Yeah.
you hear about it just like sweeping through college campuses. And then I'm looking for the note here.
Ah, Kate's got a little bit of intel for us. State
Oh,
government decides what level government does what. For instance, counties in California are in charge of public health, not cities. Yeah. So, and like where I grew up in a county right outside of a city, and like the health department, there was a little city health department and there was a county health department.
so
So,
so in Massachusetts, we have that. Like we have kind of town health departments, but the state health department would outrank them over something like COVID. They
mhm.
wouldn't be making their own decisions. The state would be making it. Um,
Oh, get
uh,
a tetanus shot helps prevent Parkinson's. What? Never heard that.
I have not heard that either, but I do get my tetanus shot.
Yeah, it's been a while. Been a while since I've had mine updated.
So yeah, they just hit me with mine one day, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, I don't step on rusty
I
nails
haven't
very
stepped on
often.
any nails.
So back to George's death. So the whole thing
Mhm,
was he dies of meningitis, and then it says, that he is sent home in a casket that's too small
mhm.
and it's already sealed up. And I was like, okay, that's
Right.
at first I'm just thinking like, wow, you guys are so cheap you couldn't get him a casket that fit his body. Like, wow, that's rude.
Mhm.
Well, I was like, well, there's a note here, and I remember Steph said I should read the notes because there's juicy things in here. And this is when I regretted my decision. Um, so in the notes on 171, a letter from one of the
Mhm.
bottoms to the oldest brother, uh, February 4th, 1918, when Tom insisted The local undertaker opened the casket for him and his oldest sons. Their grief was compounded by the incredulity. Oh God, I can't ever say this word.
Incredulity.
Yeah, there you go. And anger, their patriotic spirit shaken to its foundation. They discovered the shocking condition of the autopsied body, but could not complain or question the War Department, for it would expose the violation that their undertaker and friend of opening the casket.
So my question is, why is it a violation to open a casket that belongs to you? It's your dead person.
Well, I don't know at the time. I do know now there are all kinds of laws about handling bodies and who can handle bodies and things like that. So,
and it's because of ridiculous laws around this time.
well,
and yes, if he was a meningitis victim, yes, there could have been concerns about contagion.
Well, and actually some of the laws that we have now actually don't even have anything to do with contagion. Do you know what it has to do with?
I don't even want to know.
It has to do with like
grave robbery and stuff like that.
It has to do with the same reason why even today they prefer to hire female funeral directors and embalmers than they do male ones. So it has
people be gross and creepy.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with kind of like body desecration kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, I'm very curious, which of course we don't have the answer. We won't. But I'm very curious, why was there an autopsy if you knew the cause of death?
I know that one's very strange to me.
Yeah, and did the parents consent to that autopsy, number 2? And number 3, were you using this body for practice reasons, you know?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and then if you sealed the casket, that leads me to believe you did it without permission, which would be
right.
so highly illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And
I also I just look at this that they were like, oh, we wouldn't complain to the War Department. I'm like, I don't care how patriotic I am. You desecrate my loved one's body, you're gonna hear from me.
Well, they didn't complain to the War Department because it would have gotten their friend in trouble.
Right.
But I'm like, why didn't you just tell? Well, I would complain and tell them I opened the casket. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't have let that go.
They're not at this time period, like they're not sealed like Egyptian mummies, you know, like it's not impossible to open them. And they're not anything like how we seal them today. So like,
yeah,
I would have just, and exactly, Janet, why do an autopsy for meningitis? Which again leads me to believe that like they're medical students.
There was something hinky went on. Yeah.
Or I mean, I guess, or the other potential scenario is that he didn't actually die of meningitis. That's just what they told them.
That's true.
So, you know, especially when you're in, you know, things like World War I and stuff, where communication's shoddy, record keeping is shoddy. It, you know, it makes you wonder how many things were lied about to families about.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to digress us more, but you think about how the ease of finding out things today, or our ability to press harder, you know, because we can document things with our phones and we have access to so much more, you know. We think of all of the things, you know, probably within our own lifetimes that were covered up, swept under the rug, hidden, lied about, that nobody was ever able to uncover, you know, where we would definitely question those things today. So, I mean, there's no telling. But it really like, I don't know, it kind of like hit me in the gut when it said like, you know, the family cemetery marked off in the very pasture where he had recently tended cows, you know, and I think, you know, I'm losing family members suddenly. It's like, you know, it wasn't a slow thing, them slipping away. They were here the other day. Now they're gone. You know, that's really traumatizing. You know,
and they more than state that this death was very hard on them, as well as the following sons. And then before this, they'd already lost what, at least three children?
I've lost count at this point of all the people that
they mentioned later the loss of 5 children. So
5 out of 12, right?
yeah, so that's, and I mean, God, yeah, we lost two like really early on. It's too much loss to keep up with.
And now we're hinting at her sister is not in good shape because of all of the people that she's lost, including this nephew.
Yeah, which apparently this nephew is really the downfall for her. You know, just the this one's too much to handle. Before we get to her though, let's take pause moment here for these pretty.
Quilts.
Yeah, like
You know,
the
I
things
really
we're
feel
here
like
for.
Nancilu told Rutledge Press, look, you gotta get the quilts in there. There's too much like horrible awfulness. You gotta get some pretty quilts
Yeah.
in these pictures. Yeah, that star is just gorgeous.
And this pear basket I've never seen before. Have you ever seen that?
I was not familiar with that one, but I mean, there's so many really fun, cool basket quilt patterns, you know. I had never seen this one, but I love the fact that it's got that like it's unique. It's got that like long narrow pedestal, and then I guess that's supposed to be a pear and like an upside down pear, like
Well,
springing out
I
the
wonder
basket.
if it's the sprigs, like from the top of a pear kind of thing, which I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I've seen that we see that motif a lot in like kind of that French country revival in the 90s. I feel like my mom had tons of stuff with this little three sprig thing
Oh yeah,
without
the
the
trefoil.
basket.
Yeah,
What?
the trefoil. It's a
Mhm.
trefoil. Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
is on it is it's a symbol, it's similar to the Girl Scout symbol. That's why trefoil cookies are shaped like that.
oh, so I didn't do Girl Scouts, so I had no idea. Um, yeah, I've never seen it in this actual like basket shape.
Yeah. One of the 5 or 6 nice pretty quilts she made before any children came to their home.
When
I don't know,
nothing was
Tallulah,
when nothing was pretty ever again.
you're still making nice pretty quilts, like another 100 of them. So um yeah.
So it is this chapter when her sister dies, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So Matt dies. And did they say how Matt died? I don't think they did. He just says he died suddenly.
I feel like it
Yeah.
was, is it? Where are you looking?
It's at the bottom of page 124 where they talk about him dying. And I don't, it just says that he died suddenly and tragically at Battle Creek, leaving a wife and 3 children. I mean, maybe was he at, I mean, he had been at Battle Creek for his own health. I mean, was he back there? Because Roger was the one that worked there. Matt was there for his health.
I
So
don't
I don't know
know,
if
but
he,
as soon as you put the word tragically in,
yeah.
it wasn't good.
Yeah. And then let's see, I guess Nanny, let's see where, yeah, Nanny's suicide was right before, yeah, right before Matt.
Yeah, and it's funny because like we'd already dealt earlier on with Nanny's attempted suicide.
Mhm.
Although it doesn't say what her method of suicide was. Um,
No, usually with women, it's like hanging or poisoning. Um, and I think that that's, you know, I mean, suicide is a really tough. I mean, I feel like that's even harder than just suddenly losing somebody to any other type of death. But think about this time period. I mean, they didn't
mm.
have counseling. They didn't have like the support systems that we have today. They didn't have the National Suicide Hotline. Like, you know, how do you it's terrible. You just have to deal with this and move on. Um, you know, and I feel like that alone could have, you know, just done someone in to have their sibling take their life. But
No, and I mean it makes you wonder if at a certain point in time if Tallulah almost just becomes disassociated because of there's just
yeah.
so much loss and so much grief.
Well,
Um,
and then we're talking about Tom, let's see, on that's page 125, how he was just broken completely. He sat quietly sobbing in his Morris chair.
mhm.
And I was excited to hear about the Morris chair, but I'm like, Because my grandmother had 2 Morris chairs and I was always fascinated by them. I'm like, it's like the lazy boy of the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys know what a Morris chair is? I'm
I
assuming
don't
you
off the
do.
top of my head. I'm sure I've probably seen
Okay.
one.
So picture like one of those Adirondack chairs that, you know, and it'll have the little like thing in the back that kind of like you could sit it all the way up or you can lean back.
Okay.
Morris chair is kind of like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got like the arms, like imagine, arms on the chair, but they jut out farther than the back of the chair. And then they have these like little clips or little like kind of like a little cup shaped thing. And there's like a rod that goes across it.
Yeah.
So you put the rod in the closest ones and you're sitting straight up and you put the
Mm-hmm.
rod in the back one and you're like, ah.
Nope, I can picture that.
Yeah, they're really cool. And I'm not exactly sure where they went. I hope my aunt still has them because I'm like, I would kind of like a Morris chair. They're pretty neat.
Hmm. So never mind the sobbing. Like,
Um, but also, oh my gosh, this part about, let's see, what Talula reminded him of his brave mother, Elisa, who, after her son Bobby's death, had worked out her grief by spinning wool and knitting enough socks to buy 3 handsome mustache cups. I mean, like, talk about having a craft, something that keeps you going. And that to me, like, that spoke to me that quilting was what kept her going,
yeah.
right? Um,
Oh, Kate says page 91 side note, it says Matt shot himself in feeling. You know what? I actually now that you say that, I'm pretty sure I read that. Yeah.
I totally missed that. What was that? I completely missed that. Oh, yes, I did remember that. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. He was on a hunting trip.
So I'd say that's tragically enough.
Yeah. Yeah. My great grandfather died the same way. So, um, but long story short, like that spoke very poignantly to me because of the project I'm working on for the Quilt Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
That idea of like your handcraft keeping you going through tough times. And I mean, then it's no surprise if you like everybody in your life dies and you had to leave your home twice and you went to a sanitarium because you had serious health issues. It makes sense to me that you at some point made 180 quilts because you were like, dang, let me keep quilting. So that was just really interesting to me, like that was in here, like that, you know.
Mm-hmm. We definitely have to move on to your favoriteest chapter in this entire book because we're definitely running over time tonight. I do
Yeah.
want to, before we move on to the fabulous world of Sue, I do want to just make one quick mention about how Tom Bottoms cultivates a long-grained boll weevil resistant cotton.
Yes. And he also, remember, he was also an inventor of
Yeah.
the poop spreading machine.
Yeah. The
Um,
fertilizer machine.
yeah, and so I mean, for all of his like, oh, poor Tom, and he came from such a poor, sad family, but like this man, for all of this terrible stuff, he actually was pretty accomplished. I mean,
Yeah.
not many people can say they invented a thing and they I mean, I guess he invented the cotton too by breeding it, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm. Well, it isn't like I mean, you know more about cotton than I do, but like isn't having something be boll weevil resistant like a big deal?
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, especially going into, the depression. There was
Yeah,
a
which
lot of.
when I'm like when they're reading when they're talking about like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, oh my God.
And then the weevils got their cotton. No, they didn't, because Tom invented the weevil resistant cotton. Oh,
And then we get into her era of ladies.
our little ladies, yeah. So they're calling that one a Dutch doll.
Mm-hmm. And this one I
Um,
believe isn't actually hers. This is one
um,
similar. Because I'm pretty sure the person who has, the granddaughter who has this quilt now lives in California, and no picture of her quilt, which she still has, is
oh, I
available.
see. Okay, yeah, this one
But
was
it's
like it.
thought to be the design above.
Yeah.
And you have a quilt in this
Yeah,
design.
I have a similar little Dutch doll and similar quilts that are set like this. I just love the fact that she was going to make, so she has 15 granddaughters and 11 of those quilts survive.
Mm-hmm. And then I really like the one that she makes on 131 here. And they're called like I don't know where it was exactly in here, but they're appliqued and stuffed and made to look bosomy, which is hard to tell. I mean, you can tell in the picture a little bit, but they don't do a detail shot of this one. But if you like really kind of pay attention, like you can tell they've got, you know, a bustiness to them.
They're supposed to look they're supposed to look like a little lady versus
Well, and I find it
a little
interesting, like
sunbonnet
I
girl.
don't have we come across any that are like a stuffed applique?
I haven't, I
I
personally
haven't.
haven't, but you know, it's funny because really a lot of the sunbonnet Sue type of quilts, um, while they might have a lot of detail like with embroidery, and then the different fabrics, you know, and I think that's what these kind of quilts are really known for, is like the different fabrics you could use. And you know, you could get away with a fairly small scrap for the dress and the
Mm-hmm.
hat. But typically they're not beautifully quilted quilts. They're not, you know, they're not the prize winners that some of her earlier quilts would have been. So,
Well, and I mean, and
um,
most that I've come across are just a crosshatch quilting because the girl
mhm,
is really what you
right,
want to
yeah.
spend the attention on.
But I'm kind of wondering if, I mean, she did in this one, I mean, she does this like straight quilting, but I'm wondering if the stuffing was just kind of as an extra, you know, because her skills were better than that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I mean, not to say that, I mean, I'm not to throw shade on anybody's skills for making a sunbonnet Sue quilt, because you know I love them, but they tend to be a more of an entry level
Well,
kind
I
of
mean,
quilt
remember,
cover.
my granddaughter requested it. So,
Hmm.
um, and then, you know, we have like on 133 when she makes Colonial Girl, where it's got far more in this
Hmm.
detail
And
shot, like far more embroidery.
I love the Colonial Girl. Yeah, I've never seen this pattern before. Um, but yeah, it's pretty fabulous. It's got a lot of embroidery.
Dee Marie said she used the machine for bindings. I think she hand pieced very fast. Yes, probably.
Yeah. But I do think so. It's back here. It's not the carpenter's wheel, but the, let's see. So page 123 is where they're talking about sewn by hand. Yeah. Straight cut binding sewn by hand and stitched down with the machine. Yeah. It sounds like she used the treadle to do the binding, but
Well, and I think there was another one we were watching where she starts putting on borders, maybe. I don't remember
yeah,
which
that sounds
one.
familiar too.
You know, it sounds like once we get to the point really where she has the option to machine sew just really long monotonous
Hmm.
seams, that she might choose to treadle those. And think about like at the time, owning a treadle was expensive. It was a big deal to have, you know, your own machine in the house.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I have a
And
feeling you,
typically, yeah, I was gonna say typically I think well, I mean I have some tops that were pieced and probably way back then, but I think especially with treadles, it's difficult to do the start and stop with like
yeah,
little
yep,
it's a lot easier to do like a long
yep.
seam than to do the
Once
start
you
and
get
stop
your
with piecing.
mojo going.
Hmm. Yeah.
No, it would probably be a lot less because man, you can if you don't get going correctly and that wheel turns the other way, you've only got like half a turn before it's gonna break your thread. That
Hmm.
it would be so much less annoyance to hand piece, you know,
Yeah.
smaller units and things, especially if that's what you started with anyways. I'm sure people that probably learned on treadles from the very beginning and never really got the hang of hand piecing, they probably could be like crazy going at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
But I would, and if I had the option, then I would absolutely be doing long monotonous seams on a treadle, even on a hand crank. I would probably much prefer that.
So all of this stuff on page 134 and 135, the scarifying, and
Yeah, that
I
was
have
interesting.
I've never heard of that. Like that is so bizarre. I have never heard of that before. The Conjuring, uh,
Yeah,
I mean that was
I'm not sending my baby into the woods with some guy where I'm not gonna know what happens. Like I understand like this we're talking about a different time period and people's thoughts and feelings and whatever might have been different, but I'm just like, oof, that must have been horrifying. Although thrash
yeah,
is pretty gnarly.
right. Yeah, and I love the way they call it the thrash instead of thrush.
So yeah, when I first heard it, I'm like, do they mean thrush? Which I have a friend that recently had that and had it for months because they weren't diagnosing correctly. Oh my God, she suffered so bad. The pictures are so gnarly. Ugh.
Um, yeah, I mean in these time periods, especially country people, people living down south and in rural areas, I mean these kind of folk remedies and stuff and just weird stuff like this was really common actually. And some of the stories my grandmother would tell, and I can't remember if I've kind of told some of it here too, but like my grandmother had when she was about 6 or 7, had a very bad burn. She was basically fell into a boiling pot of water
Oh, I think you
on
told us
a
the story.
stove, yeah. And it was kind of like, so she had like, they were probably second-degree burns, all like from the nape of her neck all the way down to the back of her knees, and they were kind of like, she might never walk again. I remember they said she'll probably never have children. Always hear these crazy things, and it's like, well, again, lady bits, they're in a certain region, and
Well,
but it's like, is it because she can't attract a man? Is it because she's going to
no,
be so deformed?
well, something like not to get like X-rated here. But remember at the time everything was about missionary, and if she can't lay on her back.
Yeah, I don't know if that necessarily was like, I don't know. I don't know where they came up with
I
this
mean,
crazy crap.
regardless, it was a ridiculous statement.
Yeah, yeah. But in any event, the doctor was not a whole lot of help. I mean, he did some of the treatment and some of the like, keeping her skin clean and keeping it moist and stuff and all that stuff. But it was actually a woman, like a kind of little country hoodoo lady that came over and did some stuff. And, they were very surprised. And I mean, she had some scarring, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And she
Hmm.
was fine,
Hmm.
like she recovered
And
very quickly.
she went on to have children.
She had 3 of them. I wouldn't be here. Yeah. It's having the children that will create issues where you can't have children anymore.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it was always kind of the resident like medicine woman midwife scenario that
Mhm.
would have been handling things. But yeah, the scarifying the baby was,
Yeah, I have never in my life heard of this.
I haven't
The
even.
the old scarifying horn. Like, what? And I mean, it's almost like cupping.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had that done.
Yeah, I
I've
haven't
had it
had it
done one
done, but
time.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've had it
Seen
done
it.
one time and I mean, it doesn't hurt or anything. And, I mean, it is what it is, but like you come out of it and you look like somebody attacked you with a vacuum cleaner because you have like these
Well, I would
horrible
say
bruise, like,
the only difference is like they're not taking a razor to the
well,
raised
exactly. But that
areas.
up to the point where they bleed the child, that's what it sounds like, though, is like, bringing the blood to the surface. I'm like, okay, there's some belief systems for that, but oh my God, to cut it and then make the baby drink their own blood, like, what? This is the most crazy
Well,
voodoo thing I've ever heard
and the
of.
whole thing about like, oh, it doesn't hurt them very much. You know, they're
Yeah.
not hurt. They cry a lot, but they're not hurt. They're just crying.
I mean, it's just bizarre, very bizarre. So, yeah. And
Um,
Roger was a genius.
yeah, that that I didn't see that one coming. And all the
That Roger would be a genius.
well, just out of nowhere, it was just like, oh, by the way, this one's a genius. And I was like, oh, and like all the stuff that he can claim his name to, like this
Mhm.
whole thing where he developed an air purification system that enabled the world's first nuclear powered submarine to circle the globe underwater.
And he taught himself German in his spare time. I mean,
You know,
I mean, I
first,
go back to the fact that like you think about modern families where if all of this terrible tragedy had happened to them, you often don't see the children going on to do amazing things. Or you see like one of them goes on to do something amazing. But they're like all of the living children like did fine. And this one is a genius. I mean, these people, for all that happened to them, they really did have some amazing accomplishments.
well, and which one is it? Yeah, is it which one is the poet? Is it Elmira or Molly Ruth?
I thought it was Molly Ruth, but
Yeah, nope, it's Molly Ruth. Yeah, so she goes on to be a professor at Oklahoma University where she taught
hmm.
it. And then she
Oh,
she
yep,
brings
yep.
Robert Frost there to speak. And okay. And then I found it interesting that one brother married his brother's widow. That's just seems odd to me. I know it happens, and especially during
Yeah,
this
it
time
happened
period.
then.
Um,
Yeah, it happened then.
and then they're the ones that cared for Tom and Talula in their last years. Never a dull moment with this family. I feel like they probably wished for dull moments. I certainly wished for dull moments for them. Um, and then I mean, we've just got the 17, 18, and 19 to go. There's some really gorgeous quilts in these chapters.
Yeah,
Um,
and I have not read ahead to these chapters yet. So, we're here's hoping that
it's
we don't
not
have
tragic
any
anymore.
tragedy in the later years. I mean, they do have to
Well,
live through the depression, but
I mean, there is one of the chapters is literally called fulfillment, so hopefully that means something good. Um,
to live or die in Dixie. Well,
yeah,
there was a lot of dying.
yeah. Although it's funny, like on that page on 154, you see a picture of them really old. Tom, Tom looks like
Yeah, there's
he's
really rough.
100.
Yeah, but and there was that picture of them early in the book too, where you're like, oh, they, in hindsight, all of the bad that happened to them, they did still, the two of them, this one, the
Mm-hmm.
hand colored picture, they did live to their old age and they were together. And I mean that sometimes what helps people weather the storm is, having somebody there, whether it's
Companionship.
a spouse, a companion, somebody, a loved one that's there to
Mm-hmm.
sort of weather it all with you. And it sounds like that's what they were for each other.
Yeah.
My guess is I mean, he was religious, so probably his faith had a lot to do with it too. And I mean, I go back to it was so telling to me when I read that part about, her talking about her mother-in-law knitting.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, bingo, that's why she had made so many quilts. Because so many people died. She had to do something with herself to like keep from just falling apart.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that cumbersome note,
Yes. Lordy. Like I think I mentioned last time, I think Mary Kay had said to us, the heaviness of this book. And I was thinking, like, again, heaviness, I'm thinking, oh, it's more, history. And, Dawn's book was very, I mean, lots of pictures, lots of
it was
things to
very
talk about,
light.
little bits of trivia, very
Yeah.
light. But then when I realized once we really got into this, I was like, oh, it's not heavy because it's academic and it's heavy because everybody dies. So
The end of the story is no one's left living but the
no one got
quilt.
out alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to go back and say Nancilu was very lucky, and she did a wonderful thing by writing this book.
Yeah.
You know, and really capitalizing upon what I think was Talula's intent, was that somebody was going to tell her story one day. And she was right. And, you know,
Well,
now we get to read it.
we also have, there's mention in here that Elmira writes kind of a family history about the Bottoms. And I don't know if that talks about the quilts at all or anything, but it's funny because what we don't, or I guess maybe what we take for granted to a certain instance, is there are a million stories like this in relation to the quilts around us that are
Right,
old.
but
We don't know
don't
them.
know them. Because nobody wrote it down, or if somebody wrote it down, nobody kept it. You know, if somebody was told the story, they didn't retell it. So that's why I'm always like, I get annoyed, I guess, to be told some of the same things over and over again. But the family stories are like the one thing that I never tire of hearing, even if I've heard them 100 times. You know, like,
Except if someone's telling them about you when you're a kid.
my mother loves to tell them. But yeah, you know, I mean, I've even come around on those because it's kind of like, yeah, you know, it's part of the lore. But yeah, that's the stuff that you want those stories to keep perpetuating, because I'm trying to remember what oh gosh, it was that movie Coco. Was it Pixar or was it Disney? The movie Coco about it's about the little Mexican family, and you know,
I
it's
don't
a
think
lot
I've
of
seen that
Day of the
one.
Dead type stuff. Yeah. Oh, it's a tearjerker. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert. But there's this idea, and it's really comes out of the Mexican Day of the Dead observance, is that as long as somebody is still saying your name, you're not dead and you're not forgotten. So even if your corporeal form is no longer here, by celebrating you and saying your name and talking about you and telling stories about you, you never die. And when there's that last person that remembers you dies, that's when you die. And I was just like, you know, and I mean, in cases like this, you know, I mean, Nancilu has left us, and, you know, I would assume maybe some of her more elderly relatives are no longer around, but hopefully she's got cousins that are still talking about Talula. But we get to talk about Talula and Nancilu and keep their, you know, keep their legacy going.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. That sounds like a really good note to end on.
Yeah. For all the death and destruction. Oh, goodness.
Well,
All right.
we're going to finish this book next week. And then if you haven't, that means you got 1 week left to get your Penny McMorris Crazy Quilts book. Because next week when we finish Legacy, we'll be giving out the first assignment in that book.
Yep, and I got mine right here. I was like, oh, I haven't lost it, have I? I've been cleaning and organizing, and but here it is.
I was just saying, don't clean so good that you lose it.
And I have to say, mine came with enclosures. That's why I love to buy used books, not just because they're usually more affordable, but and some books that you can't buy new because they're out of print. But sometimes you get other people's treasures.
Interesting.
So we'll have to look at what's in mine.
We will. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us, everybody.
Yeah, you guys have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for hanging out with us.
And it was great to hang out with you, Steph.
It's great to hang out with you. As if I didn't talk to you a couple hours ago.
Shh, don't tell everybody.
All right, guys, we will see you soon.
Good night. Bye.